This is annual training for a whole bunch of things. I'm gonna start out with SDS sheets, and we'll go through the new stuff that we have and what I know. So, OSHA has revised since 2013. They started in with the new labeling, new SDS sheets, and it is formed by the United Nations Global Harmonized System of Classification and Labeling of Chemicals. So it's not just United States, it's not just here, it's worldwide. So now the labeling that you see and everything, all the little pictograms are worldwide. So the changes that were made were the labeling elements and the format of the SDS sheets. All of the SDS sheets are in a uniform format, line by line, category by category. It's all the same, no matter who the manufacturer is or what the product is. So the first compliance was to be done in December of 13, which we all went through some basic training with what SDS sheets were, kind of looked at what was on them. And the reason that that was so important is because they were going to start, some of the companies were going to start doing the new labeling, and they needed us to be able to know what those meant because it was different than what we were used to. So it's been kind of a transition over those 3 years. It is now the responsibility, and will be, the employer, Dundee County Hospital, has to train employees annually, and in doing that will teach you how to identify and know what the hazardous chemicals are, where the SDS sheets are, how to read the labels, and the hazard communication program is the labeling, the SDS sheets, and this annual training. So a label has 6 elements. There's the product identifier, which is the name, any signal word that would be dangerous or harmful to the person working with them. The pictograms, which I did not print these out for everybody, but there's a copy here that has pictures of all of them. We'll go through and talk about some of them as we do. But if anybody wants a copy of this, let me know, and we'll make some copies if you want it in at your station or in your department. The hazardous statement tells you the nature and degree of the chemical hazard, and then any precautionary statements that will help you minimize any kind of adverse result with you being exposed to that. It also has the name, address, and phone number of the manufacturer. So here's a sample, and here are the 6 elements: the product identifier, the supplier's identification, the hazardous pictograms, which are these guys here, the signal word saying danger, and then any precaution, and the hazard statements. And then this would be additional stuff down here. So the big reason that we need these labels is we need to know how to handle these products. So we need to make sure that they're stored properly, and to be able to quickly locate any first aid type things. It used to be that we had to go find the book, look it up in the SDS sheet, find out what we need to do if there was an exposure. Now, with the new GHS labeling, actually on the label itself there is a little section on the container that shows you the first aid. It'll say, you know, if splashed in eyes, this is what you do. So you don't have to go find the book. You can actually look on the product itself. It's on the label. Any questions?
They're not on all the labels yet, are they?
They're supposed to be, this is supposed to be in place by June 1st of this last 16, actually, is when it was supposed to be. But I know that not everything that we have has the upgraded labeling, and I know Vince said this morning that there's a lot of places, the fire, you know, all the books that they have are still the old MSDS, so.
Everything in the ambulance is old MSDS,
I
and that
don't
was
know.
a brand new book 6 months ago.
Don't know when they're gonna make that changeover, because according to JHS, it was supposed to have happened as of June of 2016.
Yes, I know a lot of my medications are not on
So on the labels, you can tell that there's multiple hazards by the pictograms, and those are those, like on this bottle, you can see there's 3 different things on here. So you know that there's multiple things. If they're different hazards, it will list each individually. If they're similar, like if it's an eye irritant and a respiratory irritant, it'll have the exclamation mark to kind of just encompass that it's a, not a real super hazardous thing, but it can do multiple things. So this is what the pictograms look like. So the little guy with his heart is a health hazard, carcinogens, reproductive toxicity, and all of these kind of things. The flame, of course, is flammables. The exclamation mark is one that I was talking about that kind of encompasses multiple things, skin and eye irritants. There's respiratory, multiples. The gas cylinder, under pressure, corrosion, which is the skin corrosion and burns. Anything explosive will have a little exploding bomb. The oxidizers, I said this morning, I don't know where they get oxidizer. There's a little O and it looks like fluff up above. I don't know what that is all about, but it's an oxidizer. And then the skull and crossbones, of course, is acute toxicity. So they're all prepared by the manufacturer, and each SDS sheet will have the physical hazards, health hazards, the routes that you could be exposed, precautions when you're handling them, the emergency first aid if you're exposed and need to know where to go, control measures, and they have to be readily accessible to all employees in their work area. Does anybody know where our SDS sheets are kept? No. Okay, good. And those books are there, they're in alphabetical order, and they should have everything in the facility. Once a year, we're supposed to go through there and update anything, so if somebody wants to help out, that would be awesome. So the format, I said all SDS sheets are the same, so this is the format. There's 16 sections, and section 1 will always be identification on anybody's sheet. Hazards will be 2, the composition of what the ingredients are, first aid measures, firefighting measures, which I believe is what Roger was talking about. I mean, some of the stuff in the EMT, it is the old, and Vince brought up this morning that we probably, if we have something, we probably need to get the SDS sheets out so that when somebody comes, that they know what they need to do within the facility. Any accidental release like spills, handling and storage, and then personal protective equipment when you're handling the product, physical and chemical properties, the stability and reactivity, toxicology, ecological information, disposal, transport, and regulatory. And then if there's other things, they'll add it under that section 16. So we're going to look at the uses are, you can learn before you use that product, make sure that you can handle it safely, and then if there does happen to be an exposure, how to respond to that. One of the suggestions, if anybody here ever gets exposed to a chemical, it's a really good idea to send that SDS sheet to the doctor with the patient so that they have all their information in front of them when they're ready to treat. Training is required for all employees who could possibly get exposed to hazardous chemicals annually and at the time of when they are hired. And then if there's any new hazardous material brought into the facility, the people that are working with that need to be trained also. So the training that needs to be provided, course, the labels, the information on the labels and the SDSs, how to obtain them and where to find them, the hazards of that chemical, and then protective measures, the personal protective equipment that we need to use. Also how to detect the presence of a release if something got spilled by smell or observation. So in summary, you as employees have the need and the right to know about the hazards that you're being expected to handle, and the protective measures that we have to keep you from having any adverse reactions. Anybody have any questions? So I have some sample SDSs if somebody wants to look. Anywhere from rubbing alcohol that we use every day to baby oil to lactated ringers to whatever. There is an SDS sheet for almost anything that's horrible, spillable in the world. Okay. Thank you guys for your attention.
Oh, well.
You do the video, watch the video.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Melissa, if you want to pass them this way when you're done, I haven't had them yet. I'll just stand in front of the camera a few times so it'll be proof I was here.
Okay, so my annual training is on infection prevention. And most of the stuff that's in this training is required by state. They say, okay, once a year you have to have training and train the employees on this and this and this and this. So if you see something in here that isn't really like, I have to train on TB, well, we don't have TB in our area, but you still have to get training on it. So if you wonder why, don't think I've lost it. It's what state requires. So we have two types of infection. We have nosocomial, which is any infection or pathogen which is acquired 3 days or longer after admission to the hospital, unless documentation can otherwise illustrate the presence or absence of the organism on admission. And this is what we don't want to have happen. Another name for nosocomial is hospital-acquired infection. Then we have the community-acquired. Community-acquired is like people come into the hospital and are admitted for community-acquired pneumonia, or they come in for positive for the flu. Those types of things are community-acquired. They come in here and already have them. In American hospitals alone, Center for Disease Control estimates that hospital-acquired infections account for an estimated 1.7 million infections and 99,000 associated deaths each year. Of these infections, 32% of hospital-acquired infections are urinary tract infections. And those are called CAUTIs because it's a catheter-associated UTI. So this happens on patients that come in and because of their condition or such, a Foley is inserted and this is what can happen. It also, hospital-acquired infections affect 5 to 10% of hospital patients in the U.S. and it costs an estimated $20 billion in healthcare costs. Hand hygiene, CDC says hand hygiene is still the #1 way to prevent the spread or help prevent the spread of infection. Alcohol-based, they say, is still preferable, soap and water when your hands are visibly dirty. The correct amount of alcohol just depends on what you're cleaning your hands for. And then you just rub them until it's all evaporated. Cover your cough. Years ago, I remember covering your cough in old wool. Well, then you go and you touch stuff, so you don't do it that way anymore. Also, they say it can be into a tissue, but the most preferable way is the bend of the elbow or up here in the shoulder area.
The kids in preschool now are learning that as the vampire cough.
Oh, I'll tell you, I went to the elementary school and did a training thing, like when they do that at the end of the year, or whenever it was. Oh my gosh, they're so educated in, it's like, you need to go home and teach your parents this stuff, because they knew about the cough, they knew about hand sanitizer, they knew about the wipes. I mean, they surprised me, and the teachers have been working really well with them.
Something that's really funny I saw the other day was, have you guys heard of the dab? Where the kids are all doing this thing? They're doing that and calling it destroy all bacteria. So,
Oh, that's
it's kind of fun for the kids to.
Well, I saw it,
My
you
nephew
know,
dabs all the time.
Walmart, when you go in and you can wipe your card off, and there was this little kid, I bet he was this tall the other day, and his dad. And oh my God, he had one of those wipes, and he was down wiping it underneath the cart and up on the sides of the cart. I mean, just like he was washing the car. And then he turns to his dad, and he's just so proud. He goes, "Wow, how's that, Dad?" And it was like, oh my gosh, I said, you did a good job, you know, and he was just grinning. So, stay home if you're sick. You must be fever-free for 24 hours, and that's without taking any Tylenol or ibuprofen. If you're absent for more than 3 days, you need to see a provider and get a note to return. And remember to come to me, or I don't know if your supervisor will have them or not, they may. It's just the employee health form that I have, that I ask if you've gone home because you're sick. I mean, something that we can catch. If you go home with a headache, I don't need to have you fill one out, because you couldn't have given that to the rest of us. If you go home with a cough, if you go home with a fever, if you go home because you're puking, anything like that, I need you to fill out when you come back. And what that is state requires some way of tracking employees that are ill. And their main thing is you track the employees, and like, you don't have like 6 employees after lunch that went home and they're all vomiting. I mean, that's telling us that, ooh, maybe we had some bad lettuce, or maybe we had some bad meat, or something like that. It's just to make sure that we don't have something going on within the facility that is making our employees sick, so that they can investigate and stop whatever it is. Influenza. Back in January, which would have been the last flu season, we had 2 positive A's in-house patients. One was 84 and one was 86. So far this season, we've had 6 positives. We've had 5 of the A's, 1 of the B's. We've had 2 in-house that were admitted with the flu. Both were the A. One was 64 and one was 76 years old, and both had been vaccinated. But they are saying that even though you get it, but you've been vaccinated, it downplays the symptoms and you aren't quite as sick for so long. And Tammy Katra, as health nurse, I think last time I asked her, all the employees had gotten theirs but 4. Tuberculosis, it's an airborne disease. There are 2 types. One is the latent TB, and it's in your body, but you can't spread it. And one is the active TB, and that's the contagious, and you can pass it on. Here is a map from 2007 to 2016, and I know it's kind of small, but if you see the color, like 0 to 5, in our county area, we've had none. Whereas if you go to the darkest blue, clear to the eastern part of the state, that is Douglas in Bear County. Between the time frame of 2007 and 2016, there was a total of 279 cases. And just because we're out here and we don't have any right now doesn't mean there's so much migration all over the place, and that we could very well have someone come into our ER or even to the clinic not feeling well and having the cough and end up having TB. We have a negative air pressure room. It's the scope room that has a key, and you can just turn the key and it will change into a negative air pressure room. We also have 2 portable units that can be put in like a regular hospital room to change it to a negative air pressure room. But if we get a patient as such, we won't keep. The patient will go to Kearney or Lincoln or Denver or wherever where they're equipped to handle that. Let's see, Nebraska had a total of 28 cases in 2016, and like I said, we won't keep them, they'll go be transferred. Bloodborne pathogens, OSHA's definition is disease-causing microorganisms found in human blood, as well as human blood components and products, saliva, tissue, vaginal secretions, and semen. The 3 major bloodborne pathogens is HIV, hepatitis B, and hepatitis C. Transmission, contaminated sharps, needle sticks, non-intact skin, which is acne, cuts, scratches, contact mucous membranes found in the eyes, nose, and mouth. I just read an article this week on the number of HIV, hepatitis C that like a state as close as Iowa has seen. I mean, they've seen like 2,600 new cases. A lot of it is due to a big drug abuse right now is heroin, because it's so cheap, and it's even cheaper than the opioids and that, to buy them off the street. And so you're getting a lot of heroin, which means they're sharing needles. Also, a lot of the states where, I mean, it's big. A lot of the states now where that is such a problem, you know, years and years ago, how the states would go down into the areas and offer free syringes and free needles just to help curb the hepatitis and the HIV.
Denver built a building just for it, so you can shoot up
Well,
streets.
a big hepatitis right now is hepatitis A, and you mainly hear of that like with food. Well, they're having like these outbreaks in, like, there's 5 major outbreaks going on in 5 different states. I think it was 5. And one of them that I started at was in California. And it's because there is so much homeless. And the population now of the homeless has gotten like really big. And because in California, the reason being that rent and property has become so outrageous that nobody can afford, or not nobody, but a lot of people that used to rent or that can't afford it anymore. And so the number of homeless is really growing. And they've had this huge hepatitis A, and it's like county doesn't want to do anything because of the cost, city doesn't want to do anything because of the cost, state, and so all of them think the other one should be doing something. And so finally, I did read where one of the agencies put up 700 tents for them to live in, and put up some like porta pots so that they weren't just crapping in the buckets and that. And the wildfires, I read in one of the areas the other day that there were 8 firemen that had to be decontaminated after fighting a fire in that area. And one of the 8 that had to be decontaminated, one of them they were really concerned about because he had tripped over a bucket of stool and landed in it and in this homeless area. And this is where the hepatitis A is being transmitted. And I mean, it's bad. It's really bad. Treat all bodily fluids as if they were infected. Use standard precautions. Choose your PPE according to potential exposure. We do have spill kits. They're located in the dirty workroom, lab, bottom of the basement stairs, and each of the kits are specific to that area. We have eye wash stations, dirty workroom, 2 in the clinic, 2 in the kitchen, pharmacy, lab, ER, and the boiler room. And if you have blood anywhere, like if you have it on the floor or in an exam room or in a hospital room, whatever, Wendy wants to know right away so that the housekeeping or whoever can take care of it and clean it up properly and clean it up right away.
We have one in PT too, Kathy.
Oh, you do?
Mhm.
Okay, good. Well, thank you. I'll add that. And so far this year, we have had no moving sticks. So that's awesome. Quality improvement. So far this year, we have had 1 hospital-acquired infection, and it was due to a Foley catheter. Our total or percentage is 0.41%, which I'm happy for. Providers and staff are really good about watching the placements of Foley catheters. There's certain criteria that has to be met for placing one. The one that we had, state says if you have one, then you need to kind of investigate and decide why we had it. Could it have been prevented? Could the Foley have been pulled sooner? So after I read charts, talked to staff and everything, this patient that ended up with a COTI, more than likely because of the illness and because of her other health problems, she was more or less kind of predisposed to getting one, which it's still, I mean, she got it while she was here, so it was on us, but I feel that there were a lot of other factors that contributed to it. Hand hygiene, the first 3 quarters, the compliance rate average was 89%. ILI surveillance report, this is a report that I have to do October through May every year. And it's kind of like, it asks you the questions like, how many inpatients did you have this week? And how many patients did you have that had the flu? And what was their age group? And did they end up on the vent? You have to pick one day of the week as to how many patients you had. I always choose Wednesday. And then the percentage, like we had 2 patients, so it was 14%. And you have to fill out kind of this form. It gets emailed to Southwest Public Health, and then they pass it on to CDC. And this is where CDC's surveillance of the flu comes in for all the states to know, you know, is it high, is it low, what's happening across the United States. Also participate in the Nebraska Hospital Association, the Catheter Associated Urinary Tract Infection Program. I report that quarterly. It's just how many patients per quarter, how many days of catheters being in, and if we had any COTIs. And then we report also any hospital-acquired C. diff or MRSA, and I give those to, well, it's Miranda and Kathy, and they report those to the Hospital Improvement Network. The hot topic this year, last year I think it was the Zika, so that's kind of quieted down. The year before that it was Ebola, that's kind of quieted down. I did read last week on Ebola, you know, they've been following patients. Ebola, because it was big news a couple years ago, it didn't mean it was brand new. I mean, it's been going on over in the other countries for a long, long time. And they've been following the people that have survived the Ebola virus. And it goes back to as far as, I think it was 1976 or something like that. And they have found that the people that actually get the Ebola and survive, that they still have those antibodies in their system 40 years later. And so they wouldn't get it again. So that was kind of amazing to me that they'd still be that strong. Antimicrobial stewardship is a coordinated program that promotes the appropriate use of antimicrobials, including antibiotics, improves patient outcomes, reduces microbial resistance, and decreases the spread of infections caused by multi-drug resistant organisms. And there's a lot of, like, tuberculosis. There's certain strains of TB now that are resistant to the antibiotics or to the treatment that is used. Some of the bacteria that you see a lot of, like urinary tract infections, like the Klebsiella pneumonia, a lot of that is becoming resistant to the antibiotics that we've always used to treat it. And so it's kind of scary. It's an estimated at least 2 million people become ill and 23,000 die from antibiotic-resistant infections each year. And it's estimated that if antimicrobial resistance is left unchecked, by 2050, it will kill more people yearly than cancer. I read this year a lady from the United States that had returned from a trip to India, and she came back with something. And whatever it was, I don't remember what it was or what bacteria it was, and she ended up dying because there was no antibiotic left that would treat the disease that she brought back with her. And she died because there was no way to treat her. Antibiotics and antibiotic resistance. On top of this timeline, it shows you like when, like say penicillin in the yellow to your left, the penicillin mark. This is when these antibiotics or these classes were discovered and came into being able to use them. The bottom is, the top is when they were discovered and started using them. The bottom is when they had certain bacteria became resistant to them already. And if you notice some of them, there isn't that much spread in between of when they were starting to be used and when they were already some resistance to them. The methicillin in the middle there, the bright blue, like 1960, and then it looks like in 1961, like a year later about, they already had resistance to it. In your penicillin, it was in the 1940s there, and then if you look underneath, like 1945 or 46, there were already resistance to penicillin. So the bugs are getting smarter. And new antibacterial agents approved. If you look clear over to your left, 1983 to 1987, there were 16 new antibiotics that were approved. And now you look over from 2008 to 2013, there were 2. And these discoveries and these new antibiotics don't just happen overnight. It takes like years and years of working with them, testing them, then taking them to the whatever and getting them approved as drugs. It's a lot of money and it takes a lot of years, and so we're in trouble. How you can help: take antibiotics exactly as your provider instructs. Only take antibiotics prescribed to you. Don't save antibiotics for the next illness or share with others. If you're not taking your complete course of antibiotics, then you may be hitting your bugs with, like, say you took half of it. Okay, that bug is on its way out. I mean, it's not resistant to the antibiotic and you're feeling better and you think, oh, I'm done, and you save that other half. It didn't completely kill what you got, and so now it's only given it a little taste of the antibiotics so it can build up antibodies to it, and so that's how we get antimicrobial resistance. And not all antibiotics are the same, so you're saving your half of antibiotic or part of your antibiotic because next time you get sick, you're gonna, or somebody in the family gets sick, you're gonna give it to them. Well, then you're giving them something that may not work, but again, you're getting the resistance going on something else out there. And your providers aren't trying to be a pain in the ass, excuse me, because I know they take a lot of heat when people come in and they get very angry when they don't get an antibiotic because it's the cure-all, they think. But there's a reason why your provider doesn't give you an antibiotic. If you have a virus, antibiotics aren't going to work on your virus. And not only, antibiotics can cause harm also. I mean, like, when we have somebody in for their community-acquired pneumonia and they get put on antibiotics, it can affect your kidneys. They can have a bad reaction to that antibiotic, not knowing that they're allergic to it. And so there's downside things to antibiotics. They aren't just always good. Most important thing is your hand washing to help prevent the infections occurring and reduce the transfer of infection. Any questions? One of the things that the state requires is that we kind of go over like the donning and doffing, putting on and taking off of your personal protective stuff. So I have a short 7-minute video on that.
Personal protective equipment should be selected based upon proximity to the patient and the likelihood of contact with any blood or body fluids during procedures in the patient care area. This video will demonstrate the proper sequence for donning and doffing personal protective equipment from the Centers for Disease Control.
Is that gonna come up? Oh, thank you.
Putting on, taking off.
The first step in donning personal protective equipment is good hand hygiene. The second step of the procedure is donning the gown. The gown should be fastened at the back of the neck and the waist by tying a bow. The third step is the selection of respiratory protection. One option might be a procedure mask. Procedure masks are used for droplet precautions. Droplet precautions are used in the care of patients with influenza. To apply this mask, gently crease the metal insert to create an indentation for your nose. Then cuff the elastic bands around your ears and spread the mask to cover your face from the bridge of your nose to below the chin. Finally, ensure the mask is snug and comfortable on your face. Procedure masks also come with attached eye protection. This mask is applied in a similar fashion. Respirators act as a filter to prevent small particles from entering the airway of the person wearing them. A respirator should be fit tested annually in order to ensure a good seal. The properly sized respirator should always be used. Place the respirator on your face and position the straps at the back of the head and at the base of the neck. The elastic strap should be in contact with the skin on your neck, so remove any hair that is in the way. Press the mask along the edges to seal it to your skin. Finally, breathe deeply in and out, feeling for any areas where air may be escaping along the edges. Respirators can be shaped to fit the face or be folded. Folded respirators are applied in a similar fashion, ensuring that the respirator is fully unfolded and has a tight seal with the skin. Again, breathe deeply in and out, feeling for any areas where air may be escaping along the edges. Facial hair will prevent the respirator from making a tight seal with the skin. Even a small amount of stubble will compromise the seal and reduce the protection. If the protection you selected does not have attached eye protection, eyewear should be selected next. Protective eyewear might be safety glasses or goggles. Many shapes and styles are available. The final step in the procedure is the application of gloves. Ensure that the cuff of each glove covers the wrist of the isolation gown. A secure fit will prevent gapping while providing care to the patient. Before entering the room, ensure all personal protective equipment is in place and comfortable. This will prevent you from adjusting your personal protective equipment while in the patient care area and potentially contaminating unprotected areas of your body. You are now ready to provide care to your patient. The first step in the procedure to remove personal protective equipment is doffing the gloves. Gloves are removed first because they are likely the dirtiest item and are contaminated on the external surfaces. Grasp the first glove on the external surface at the cuff and gently peel off. Hold the removed glove in the gloved hand, then slide a finger of the ungloved hand under the remaining glove, touching its clean side only, and gently peel the second glove off over the first glove. Discard the gloves in the trash. All movements in doffing should be slow and intentional to prevent the aerosolizing of any contaminants on the used equipment. The second step in this procedure is to remove your eye protection. The glasses or goggles are contaminated on the outside, so touch only the earpieces or elastic bands while removing them. Eye protection should be placed in the trash or be placed in a designated area for reprocessing. The third item to be removed is the gown. The most contaminated areas of the gown are the front and sleeves. Unfasten the ties at the neck and waist, then remove the gown by slowly pulling it down and rolling it away from the body with the clean side out to form a bundle. Use the foot pedal to lift the lid on the linen hamper. Then place the entire gown inside the bag. Disposable gowns may be discarded in the trash. Be sure that the entire gown is inside the trash can. Gowns left hanging are a risk for contamination. The fourth step is the removal of respiratory protection. It is removed last to prevent any transmission of contaminated particles to your respiratory tract while removing the other equipment. Touching the front of the mask or respirator should be minimized during removal. When a mask or respirator has two elastic bands, remove the bottom one first. Discard the mask in the trash. Finally, perform good hand hygiene immediately after using all of your personal protective equipment.
That is all I have for infection prevention. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. And Lakin is working the floor today, and so she has her HIPPA. So there's just a couple of quick videos that I'll show you now.
most important aspects of confidentiality is called PII, or Personally Identifiable Information. PII data varies greatly, but think of it as being used for the express purpose of distinguishing individual identity. A person's full name is considered PII, but if it is a common name, the value of it as PII is limited since it could not be used to uniquely identify a single person. Similarly, a first name is generally not considered PII unless it is associated with another piece of personal data that can identify a person. But a mother's maiden name can be of value, especially since it is often used as a security confirmation question. So, Bob alone is useless. Bob Crable is a good source. Bob Crable at 1313 Mockingbird Lane, Victimville, Alabama, 33333.
It was just a figure of speech.
Specifically on one person. Add a social security number and a few other pieces of information unique to Bob Crable, and the criminal has all he needs to steal Bob's identity, rack up huge debts, and leave Bob on his own to sort it out, which will be a costly, stressful, and time-consuming process. Protecting PII is a major component of any organization's information security and privacy efforts. It is also key to avoiding identity theft, which affects more than 11 million people every year just in the U.S. Personally identifiable information, PII, is often discussed in relation to compliance. PCI, HIPPA, FERPA, GLBA, etc. And we should all have a basic understanding of privacy compliance mandates, since not only do many of us have to follow them, but all of our own PII is affected by these laws and the people who maintain the privacy of our files. Most companies and organizations have a legal responsibility to protect various forms of PII for their employees, customers, vendors, etc. Every organization has a different policy regarding PII, and it is your responsibility to know and follow the policy at your workplace. Not only do companies have rules regarding PII, but most countries have federal laws in place protecting privacy. As always, there are exceptions to every rule. In the U.S., for example, real estate ownership is considered public information. Within the U.S., each industry also has specific legal mandates they have to follow when protecting PII. HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, and HITECH, Health Information Technology for Economic and Clinical Health, set national standards for the security and privacy of electronic healthcare transactions and national identifiers for providers, health insurance plans, and employers. The Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, PCI DSS, is designed to protect the PII of an individual's cardholder information for debit, credit, prepaid, e-purse, ATM, and POS cards. In the financial sector, PII protection is regulated by the Graham-Leach-Wiley Act, GLBA, and provides customers with a large range of guidelines, processes, and recourses when data is breached. Education-related PII is protected through FERPA. U.S. government PII has FSMA. The energy sector is protected by FERC, NERC, and that's just a few of the many regulations and PII-related acronyms out there. Though the terminology and rules surrounding each compliance mandate differs, the goal of all of them is the same: protect PII. The safest route, in order to avoid the minefield of legal interpretations, is to treat all of the information mentioned previously as PII. At home, make sure you are aware of what PII you need to protect. Know what information is considered public about you and your family. You should be aware that just because a person, an office, or any business asks for PII, that does not always mean you must provide it. At work, you should be aware of several aspects of protecting PII. Ask yourself the following questions. Do you handle any PII of any kind? Do you know what kind you handle? Do you know who else is entitled to have access to it? Do you know the rules about how to transmit PII outside of the company? Do Do you know how to recognize a social engineering attack when someone is trying to extract PII from you? Do you know which industry or other specific regulatory guidelines you need to follow? Do you know how to report any real or potential PII breaches? If you don't know the answers to these questions, you should find out right away.
No, it's this 1 minute and 42-second one, trust me.
That's
It's
the one we
this
just
one.
watched, watched that one first.
Yeah, that was first.
Yeah.
This one was first? The 1 minute one?
Yeah.
I watched this one.
Really?
Yeah. I didn't mean to argue with that.
Okay.
Personally identifiable information, or PII, is any information that can be used to identify, contact, or locate an individual. Small bits of information, such as a first and last name, can be used alone, but are more valuable in combination with information, such as your current job, plus a street address. Medical information is called personal health information, or PHI. Specifically identifiable information from educational, financial, and government institutions include potential PII elements, such as name, fingerprints, contact info, social security, or national ID number, etc. Think about it from a criminal's perspective. What information might a bad guy need in order to pull off an epic identity theft? A last name, which by itself may not be PII since many people can share the same name. A date of birth, which by itself may not be PII since many people share the same birthday. A credit card number, which is PII since every card number is unique. Even though the first two things may not be considered PII alone, when combined and added to the golden ticket, a credit card number, the criminal has everything he or she would need to start a major shopping spree in your good name. The following tips will help you not only protect your own PII, but that which you handle and need to protect at work. 1. Make sure you know what kinds of PII you handle at work and who is entitled to have access to it. 2. Learn to recognize the various kinds of social engineering attacks so you don't give out PII to someone trying to extract it from you, whether it's your personal information or that of a customer, partner, or other protected entity. 3. Stay on top of industry-specific regulatory guidelines so you act according to compliance standards. 4. Only email PII according to company policy. There should be no exceptions. 5. If on mobile devices, make sure PII is always fully encrypted. Ask if you don't know. 6. Do not write down PII unless it is absolutely necessary. And if you must, be sure to completely destroy the hard copy once it is no longer. Think shred. 7. If you work with POS, point of sale terminals, follow PCI compliance guidelines. Keep a close eye on the machine and credit card receipts. If you notice any new equipment has been added to the terminal, or that the receipt is printing the entire credit card number, report it immediately. 8. Do not share PII unless there is an explicit business reason to do so. 9. Avoid putting PII on USB thumb drives and other portable media. If necessary, follow company policy and determine approved encryption methods. 10. Shred, shred, shred. Make sure all hard copy documents with PII or other customer information are completely shredded or destroyed. Know your shredding policy. Keeping PII private comes down to basic common sense security principles. Security and privacy work together. We must be vigilant about our security practices in order to protect and maintain the privacy of the PII we handle. A strong focus on data privacy helps ensure the security of the entire organization. If you ever have any questions about your PII responsibilities, be sure to ask a manager immediately.
That's all on HIPPA.
Bright light.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, it's kind of hard to follow Bobby's breakfast.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sam.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I'm gonna go over fire. I'm also gonna go over our tornado policy. And I'm gonna throw in a little winter weather stuff. And then I'm gonna go over a little bit of our emergency stuff, so. Does everybody know what we do when the fire alarms go off?
We need, go over to this panel over here and follow the steps that are on. These are the church nurse, you know the area of the fire, if you're a patient care personnel, you ensure patient safety, remove them from the area.
First thing you want to do is whatever your area is, if your lab, business office, front reception, you want to check everything in your area first. Once you have okayed that everything is good in your area, then you can go to seek the fire. So say you're out there in front reception and it's announced that the fire's in the back hall. You pass through these fire doors or these fire doors? Yes. As long as you look through the window, you don't visibly see smoke or fire, and the door's not hot, you can pass through fire doors. So,
Somebody's already down there.
so we use RACE as an acronym. Everybody know what RACE is? It can be evacuate or extinguish. We don't really push the extinguish here because if the fire's buried in this, don't try to put it out. Get the people to safety, close the door, shut off the oxygen supply. Fire department's on their way, that's their job. So, if you are using a fire extinguisher, what is PASS? Does everybody know what it takes to make a fire? So if we shut that door and we shut off most of the oxygen to that fire, it's not going to grow very fast. Our doors are 1 hour fire rated doors, our ceilings 1 hour fire rated, and our smoke barriers are 2 hour fire rated. So hopefully it's not going to take an hour for the fire department to get 4 blocks. So we should be in good shape. We are block construction for most of this building. So other than the contents of the room, there's not a whole lot that's going to burn in there. Who's in charge during the fire? 99% of the time it's going to be the charge nurse because they are in charge of the patients. That's our main focus is patient safety. So, how do we know if a room has been checked already? We switched our safe magnets to a little red peg. When you're putting those back up, don't put them clear up. We can put them in this region. That way the shorter people can get to them also. Pull them down even with the doorknob after you've checked that door. And as long as they're up here, I mean, they don't even have to be that high as long as people can reach them. But down even with the doorknob means that door's been checked. Say we're having a fire drill, this door's closed, it's going into a room, how would you check that door?
Back your head.
On the door or the knob? Door. You want to make sure that's not hot before you ever touch this, because if that's hot, your skin is going to stick to it. So, does everybody know the purpose of the fire doors and the smoke barriers? I mean, if there's a fire, say in Lakin's office, that smoke barrier is closed, it's not letting smoke or flame through, would you absolutely have to evacuate patients? No. meant to do. As long as they're containing it, you're fine to have it contained to that area and not evacuate. So say it was down patient hall, how would we evacuate our patients? You're gonna get them out of that room if they happen to be in that room, the room next to it, the room across from it. In what order would you go if, once you got that patient out of that room that was on fire, the patient next to it was mobile and the patient across from it was immobile? Yeah, always do your immobiles first. Your mobiles can follow you if they have to. Where would you evacuate them to?
Come very much into the hall and that.
Yeah. Does everybody know where our meeting area is in a fire? What if the nurse's station is on fire?
Hospital parking lot.
Back hall by X-ray. That's our secondary meeting spot. If we evacuate, our first spot is to go over here by the trees by our other parking lot. If the smoke and stuff is going that way, then we go down here on this side. Does everybody know how smoke behaves in a fire? Initially, inside this building, if you have a fire, your fire's going to start at the floor, your smoke's going to go up. So once that fire gathers heat and size, at some point it's going to hit the ceiling, that smoke's going to start coming back down, and you're going to get smoke and heat coming back down. So if you have to go into smoke, always stay low. You'll be underneath that smoke. As it comes back down, it's going to take it a while to come down. So if you go into a fire and your smoke line's right here, that's been burning for quite a while, because your smoke should be high if it's just first started. Once in a while, you'll see me doing fire drills where I might lay somebody in a bed down patient hall and I just pull the call light. The reason I do that is because in a real situation, the chances of you being alerted to a fire because the alarms are going off are pretty slim. You're actually going to find that fire probably. And you need to know what to do. You need to know to go to the nearest pull station and pull that station, because that's what's going to set those alarms off. Does everybody know why we go to the nearest station? Yeah. You don't want to be down patient hall and call out front and tell them to pull the fire alarm out there, because then everybody's going to go out there looking for the fire. And pull it nearest to the fire that you can get to. So you pull that first. Rescue your patient first, then pull the alarm. Does anybody know where most hospital fires occur? Highest number of hospital fires in the last 10 years is in the operating room. They set the patients on fire.
Free-out procedures.
With all the alcohol and stuff we use now, when they hit them with the cautery tool to open them up, it'll set them on fire. And you can do the same thing with alcohol. I'm not going to do it because it's fairly dangerous, but your alcohol sanitizer, if you light that on fire, it'll be completely on fire and you won't see it. It burns so clear that unless you have the lights off, you won't see it. So what happens is if you put that hand sanitizer on and you don't rub your hands till they're dry, you go over here and touch this and there's static electricity or a spark from that switch, your hands will literally be on fire and you won't feel it until it's too late. So always rub that stuff dry before you touch an ignition source. Is everybody comfortable with what their job duty is in a fire drill? in your area, do you know what your responsibilities are? If there is a fire in the basement, or if you check the basement, at the bottom of the stairs, there's a light switch on the wall at the bottom of the stairs about this high. That light switch kills everything in the boiler room. Kills our boilers, kills the gas to the boilers, everything. So if there's a fire situation, you want to shut that off because that kills all of the fuel going into that boiler room.
You don't want people to kill that if it's just a drill, do you?
Yep. As soon as you flip it on, it'll all come back online. But I want them to get in the habit of flipping that. So. Does everybody know what we're looking for on a fire drill? This signifies the fire. It'll be on, flashing. That's what you're looking for. So whether I pull an alarm or if I have it sitting in a room to where you're going to initiate the drill, that's what you're going to be looking for right there. So if you walk in a room, see that flashing and the alarms aren't going off, if there's somebody in the room, rescue them, pull the alarm, fire drill starts. When we get done here, I'll take everybody out there, we'll go over the fire panel. The key points I want to hit on that fire panel is whoever initiates the panel stays there the entire time. That's their baby. They don't hand it off to somebody else, you stay there the entire time. We used to have a habit of, as soon as we'd get there, we'd call dispatch and tell them we were having a fire drill. It's the reason why their instructions are written the way they are. Should be no calls to the dispatch until the drill is over. Because what we ran into was a couple times our alarms were going off and we weren't having drills, and people were calling down there and telling them it was a drill. And then once they figured out it wasn't, then they were calling back to tell them to send the fire department. So until the drill's over and you know it's a drill, don't call dispatch. If it's a drill, they know it, they're not going to send the fire department, because I call them ahead of time and let them know it's a drill. So the other thing on that, so I don't forget when I'm out there, is that's set up in zones, and there's only so many zones in that panel. And the way this place was wired with the old panel, if it says North Hall X-ray, it means everything from the fire doors by the mail room all the way down that hall, across the back hall by X-ray and RT, and back up to the fire doors by Lakin's office. That's North Hall X-ray. So all the rest of them are pretty much broke out by front reception, lab, specialty clinic, patient hall, QHC. They're pretty much all on their own. You don't know where you're going. So if we're having a drill and it says lab, what do you do on your way to lab? And check every room on your way to where you're going. Because it can say someplace, that doesn't mean there's not another little fire somewhere else if you have people running around starting fires for some reason. I'm sure they wouldn't. But now when you're running that panel, when you hit silence alarms, if that fire is down in patient hall and you hit silence alarms, and for some reason then a fire would start in a business office, that panel is going to go off again. It still detects the other areas. You just silence the alarm for the area that it was on for. So it will still detect everything else. Also, if you had a fire in the ductwork or an air handler, there are damper switches in those that detect smoke and fire. So at that point, if there was one, it would shut all of our HVAC off and it would alarm us the same way as a regular fire inside the building would. So, any questions on fire? Okay, I'll move on to tornado. Does everybody know what a tornado watch is?
Conditions are favorable.
And when we learn up here that we have a tornado watch, a tornado warning, how do we get that information? Yep. Once it comes across the wire from NOAA in Goodland, the sheriff's office is gonna make a physical phone call up here, and that's what we go off of here. So, what do we do in a watch? Yeah. Everybody's to sign in at the nurse's station. It'll be announced that we're in a tornado watch. So everybody needs to sign in. If you're busy and it takes you a couple minutes, still come up there and sign in. The reason we do that is if we actually get hit by a tornado, then we have a body count and who we're looking for if we can't find you. So it's pretty important that you sign in. If it starts in the morning and it's going all day, if you leave for lunch or you gotta go somewhere, say the nursing home to see patients, sign out, sign back in when you come back. Because that would be pretty bad if we were looking for you and you weren't here. So just make sure you do that. So once that turns over to a warning, then what do we do?
Patients are on the central hub.
Instructions.
Bring your patients to the safe area. Our safe area was deemed by the fire marshal in 2005, I believe. He felt that was the most structurally sound area, was this central area. So out in the nurse's station, you can be in here, and the business office, you can be in the business office on the north side of the business office.
At one time we were saying dining room.
Yeah, you can be in the dining room, because it's inside fire doors. Yep. Can we make people stay here that are, say, in the clinic? I would suggest that you really talk to them and tell them why we want them to stay here, but we cannot make them stay. Do we lock the doors during a tornado warning? No. We don't want to restrict access to maybe somebody that's driving down the highway and needs to get into shelter, so we'll leave those open. So, when do we deem that it's safe to leave the safe area? Yeah. Once the sheriff's office calls up here and tells us, and a lot of times if you're sitting, well, we used to have a TV here, if you're sitting here watching the TV, you're gonna see that it's been canceled. But the sheriff's office has to get it off the wire, they have to call up here. So sometimes there's a little time delay, but we just base it off of when the sheriff's office contacts us. That's how we do it, so. So say that we have a tornado warning and you're seeing patients in the clinic or wherever. Do you have to immediately come to the safe area?
In a tornado warning?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yep. Yep. You gotta come, so. Sure, surgery would be a little bit different, but we've never ran into that, so. Does anybody have any questions on tornadoes? Trying to make it short and sweet here. Okay, I got just a little bit on winter weather, since we are experiencing some pretty cold temperatures right now. Winter storm watch, if you see that, it basically means that it's favorable for a winter storm event of heavy sleet, snow, ice, and blowing snow. basically, if they issue that winter storm watch, they're expecting in the next 24 to 72 hours, either 7 inches of snow in 12 hours or 9 or more in 24 hours. So that's what a storm watch is. The wind chill watch is in the next 24 to 72 hours. They're figuring that the wind chill temperatures will reach or exceed 25 below zero. So that's a wind chill watch. A blizzard warning means that it's imminent in the next 12 to 36 hours. Sustained winds or frequent gusts over 35 miles an hour will accompany snow that is capable of reducing visibility to a quarter mile or less. So that's your blizzard warning. Now, winter storm warning is the same as the watch, but you are going to experience in the next 12 to 36 hours 7 to 9 inches of snow. So just some little tidbits I came up with on that. So on the emergency side of things, they talked about the SDS. For the professionals, still none of them are doing SDSs. They're still doing it off the old MSDS sheets. So the fire department, hazmat teams, whatever comes in here, they're going to be going off the old SDSs. So if you have chemicals in your area, make sure you know those MSDSs and what part of those to find your emergency and firefighting stuff in, because it's going to be up to you to show them in those what it is, because they have no idea. Most of them have never seen an SDS. They're still trained in MSDS. They are going to carry this. This is a hazmat and fire department Bible right here. It has every chemical basically made in here. They can look it up alphabetically or by category. If they're hazmat trained, they're going to know what category and properties are in that chemical. It's going to tell them whether they need to wet decon, dry decon, what it will mix with, what it won't mix with, and how to take care of the spill. It'll also tell them at what temperatures it is unstable at, and it'll also tell them how big of an area to evacuate depending on what the chemical is. So if you got some time, sometime, leave through this. I'm not saying take it to bed with you because you'll fall asleep real quick, but there is some good reading in here.
Where does that get kept at?
It's on the cart with the emergency stuff and our incident command stuff. If you happen to have a farmer or somebody come in here that had a chemical on them, this is a little just-in-time training for wet decon that we keep on that card also. You can leaf through it. It'll tell you how to doff and don pappers, your pre-decon activities, and then your decon and post-decon activities. So, I mean, if it's just one person and we don't have the decon team here, anybody can grab this, you know, and they can get it done. There is, in the back, that little closet right outside the back door. There's always a hose hooked up in there. It's got hot and cold water. And there's also a little kid swimming pool in there. So if somebody comes in with something you can wet decon and it's just one person, you can stand them in that pool, wash them off, and then complete it that way instead of dragging the whole tent and everything out. So just remember some of that. This is a pocket guide to hospital incident command. There's several of these on that cart. Inside here, just pretty much walks you through incident command. So if you're here on a weekend or at night, and there's not a lot of people here and you got to stand up incident command, this will pretty much walk you through it and what to do. So if you want to take a look at those, it's got your operations charts and who you definitely need and who you can get by without. It's got hazmat stuff in there, and it also tells you how to walk through your forms. So that's on that card also if anybody wants to look at it. Kathy talked to you about negative pressure. I'm sure after we do the fire panel, I'll show you where it's at, how to run it, what to do to run it, and I'll also take you downstairs and show you where our portable units are kept if you want to go down there and look at those. So that's pretty much what I got, other than showing you the fire panel and the negative air. In the fire panel, you'll come over here, right here where it says Dundee County Hospital System Normal. Wherever that alarm is at, it's going to tell you where it's at. So QHC, patient hall, wherever. Like I said, if it's North Hall X-ray, it means everything down that hall, across the back hall, and up that hall. So it can be anything inside those 3 halls. So you'll check the display for the fire location. That's your first step. And then push button number 1. And the reason we do that in that order is so you know where it's at. And then we have to silence the alarm so we can page overhead and people can hear where it's at. So once you silence that, pick up that phone right there, dial 51, that's our overhead page line, and announce the fire location. People are going to seek the fire. If it's a drill, they're going to find it. They're going to pick up the closest phone, and they're going to announce that fire all clear. So once they do that, you can push button number 2 to reset the system. And then pick up the phone again, dial out, and tell the dispatcher at the courthouse that the drill's over. Like I said, if it's a drill, they know it's a drill because I call them so they don't send the fire department. If it's an actual fire, you're obviously not going to get the all clear. You're going to know it's a fire. At that point, you will not reset this panel unless the fire chief or the fire marshal instructs you to, depending on how bad the fire is. So does anybody have questions on that? Okay. Pretty simple, just grab it and pull it. Some of them are going to pull pretty hard. You're not going to break them, that's the way they're made. Now down here in this hall, you'll see that fire alarm right there. Does anybody know why they strobe and flash?
For people who are deaf.
Yep, some people are hard of hearing and they can see the strobe, and other people are blind and they can hear it. So that's why those are made that way. Everybody good on this part? Okay. If you want to know how the negative air runs, we'll go down there.
I've seen it.
Oops, sorry.
Hope you have a nice friend.
Okay, so in this room, we can make it negative air. We also have this ante room attached to this. So if you're going to make this room negative air, you need to get you a towel and dampen it. It doesn't need to be wet, just damp. Put it against this door in here, this inside door. I would close this door, put one under this door also, and then this door will get one also. At that point, you just open this right here. The key that controls this lives in there. You just put the key in, turn it to negative air. At that point, if you had it all sealed up, it would start becoming a negative air environment. I'll show you what it's going to do here in a minute to where it's not negative air. If at any point this room came to not be negative air, it's got 2 alarms on it. It's going to alarm here, and it's going to alarm here. I'm waiting on it.
Make them higher.
We also have 2 portable negative air units. That's what it'll do when it's alarming. And it'll tell you that it's low negative air alarm. If it wasn't low, it would say normal negative air and it would give you a pressure on that. So that's how you run that part of it. The 2 portable negative air units, it's probably going to depend on whether it's one person or if we're going to have 5 or 6 people. I would always push to put those in the big double rooms. That way, if you had more than one person and they met the criteria, they could cohort them in one room. But basically, you take the screen out of the window. There's 4 little deals on it. I'll show you when we get downstairs. Pop the screen out, pop this in there, lock them back in, and then you hook up the tube to the negative air unit, and then that vents out the window. You have to open the window, but just one side. So, if you want to come downstairs, I'll show you where they live. Go ahead and show you this. This is the switch I was talking about. It's labeled boiler emergency shutdown switch. That kills everything in that boiler room. Kills electricity, gas, everything. All pumps and everything will shut down in there. So all you got to do is lift that up, flip that switch down. Now, negative air units are these 2 sitting right here. They each have a blue cover on them. There's extra cases of filters here, extra filters here. So basically what you do is you'll put this on top of this, lock it down with this ring, and then we tape them. At that point it's just a matter of plugging that in, opening this up, turning this on to high, and it'll start doing its thing. These are the inserts for the windows. Like I said, to put these in, you're going to be going to the window. There's 2 of these on top and 2 on the bottom. So you pop these in, pop those in, pop the screen out that's in there, open that side of the window, put this back in there, and then lock it in. And that's basically all there is to that. This tube runs from there, and then it hooks on here with another ring, and we tape that also. So they're pretty simple units. And that's all I got.